Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast, the podcast that bridges wisdom from generation to generation. And I'm your host, Coach Furtado. In our episode today, we interview the one and only Dr. Amber Selking, founder of Selking Performance, sports psychologist, PhD, an author, and a speaker. In our conversation today, we have a rich dialogue around leadership, the impact, the influence, who has influenced her. She's worked with some wonderful people and worked with the Notre Dame football team and Coach Kelly. Also talking about the mental game, the upstairs, in between the ears, how to be an effective leader as a coach and impact our athletes, our youth at another level, and talking about being specific. It's one of the most inspirational and motivational episodes that we have had, backed with science. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Dr. Selking, and welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast. I'm thrilled to have you on today, talk about your book, Winning the Mental Game and Building Championship Mindsets. I believe the coaches and young leaders are going to get a lot out of this. So, the first question that we always ask our guests, it's a bit of a loaded question, is what is your definition of impactful leadership?
Yeah, to me, I'm a big John Maxwell person, right? And so Maxwell says that leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. But I'm also a little bit of a nerd. And so, influence, I feel like, is a word that we throw around a lot. But what does influence actually mean? And so the definition of influence is the ability to have an impact on or to shape the character, behavior, or perspectives of someone or something. And that to me is impactful leadership, the ability to shape the development of an individual. Now, the reality of it is there can be positive influence and negative influence. And so impactful leadership, hopefully, is positive, impactful leadership, where, again, you're shaping the character, the development, the perspectives of another individual. And to me, that's what great leadership is all about.
Yeah, I love that. And it's all about, shaping and impacting that person so then they can go and shape and impact another person and create that domino and ripple effect of leadership. So with that being said, I know that your backstory is, you were in athletics and now you are working in athletics still to this day along the mental side of things. And I'm curious where just share with the listeners and myself a little bit more about your story and how you kind of have came to where you are right now in this moment.
Yeah. I think the other thing about leadership that I think is really important that I learned in undergrad was, when a leader leaves, is what they were a part of or the system they created, does it sustain or does it go away with them? And so I share that to say, one, I think that's another piece of impactful leadership that is important to consider is, do we actually build a system that influences other people that is sustainable once we leave it? I think that's a mark of a great leader. And I share that because that to me is what's really important about the mental game. I want people to grow in their mental game and understand the power of their mind that they have to impact their own lives and those around them. But I don't want that to be dependent on me, right? I want them to recognize that they, with a little bit of knowledge, with a little bit of education, and equipping and empowering, people really come to understand their own ability to lead lead themselves well through life. And again, that goes back to my own story, right? I was a soccer player and played at Notre Dame my freshman year. We were undefeated and lost against North Carolina by 1 goal in the national championship game. And then I got cut from the team. I had tore both my ACLs. And so I was redshirted for half the year and my knees just didn't come back the way the coaches wanted them to. And I went through this identity crisis. If I'm not Amber, the soccer player, who am I? And, the crazy thing is I had a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I had a family at home that loves me. And I was at the University of Notre Dame, fairly certain my life is going to be okay, but I still had this crisis. And I think that that's really what got me into, I led Notre Dame Christian Athletes as an undergrad student. And that was what got me, I poured so much into it. And then all of a sudden I was a senior and I was like, wow, I'm about to leave and nobody else is doing anything but me. So that's what really like taught me how to build a leadership team and create a system that's sustainable. And so NDCA exists to this day at ND, which is pretty awesome. But that was really my first foray into leadership and understanding the importance of leadership, and also the reason that ultimately got me into the field of sports psychology, because I knew, I was blessed to be raised with a family that helped train my mental game, I had some tools to go to when I was in a really dark and hard season of life. And I wanted to be able to equip other athletes and professionals with those same things to navigate hard times in life, because that's real.
Yeah, it's definitely real. And it's one of the things that I personally love about sports, and so many of us do, whether we're athletes, coaches, or probably some of both, right? We've worn both identities, and there's so much we can learn from sports, but so much of sports is mental, and so much of life is mental. And I'd love to, start exploring some of your work and your research about sports psychology and the mental game. And with that, can you talk about how the science behind how our thoughts affect our behaviors?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the sad part is we don't teach brain science in preschool, which I think we should. Right. I feel like if people learned how to think right and to use their brains at a young age, we'd have a lot stronger, healthier, influential people in the world. But the reason we don't is because we can't see it, right? I mean, we can see our waistline. We can see our 40 time getting faster. We can see our biceps getting bigger, right? We can see our ability to increase our math scores, right? Increase. But we can't see our brain necessarily being able to focus better and being able to be more confident. And so we tend to not manage it, even though it is fundamentally one of the most important drivers of our success. And so what I try to do through my work is teach people some of the science behind brain science and how their brain works and how it impacts how they show up, and really realize how important it is to manage our thoughts and our thought life. Because what we know is that our thoughts affect our emotions affect our physiological response, and physio just means body, right? So this is things like your heart rate, your muscle tension, your visual field, your hormones, and ultimately how our bodies are determine our performance or how we show up in the moment. And so thoughts start that process. And the beautiful thing is we get to choose and control our thoughts. So as many uncontrollables as there are out in the world, the number one driver of how we show up moment by moment in our lives is in fact in our control. And it's how we think and what we choose to think about and how we choose to think about different situations or scenarios that we encounter.
So I'm guessing that you've got quite a bit of pushback around, like, Dr. Stuckey, I can choose my thoughts, right? Because we have so many thoughts that come to us throughout the day. So I'd love for you to unpack a little bit more about how we can choose and control our thoughts.
Yeah. So, the reality of it is we can't control which thoughts try to come into our head. We've all been driving down the road on a beautiful sunny day and some random thought comes out of nowhere and we're like, where in the hell did that come from? Yeah. Right. But we do get to choose and control what we do with those thoughts once we become aware of them. And so in the book, as you know, play number one in this foundational mental playbook is awareness, because we have to be aware before we enhance. And humans have about 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And most people are just very unaware of the thoughts that they're having, that are streaming through their brain, that are creating emotions, that are creating physiological responses like increased heart rate and muscle tension and increased cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And so it's really an art of awareness to raise our awareness of what are the thoughts that I'm thinking, and are these thoughts helpful to me or hurtful for me? And that's really the part that we get to control. If we recognize that, man, this thought isn't creating a healthy, helpful emotion, well, then change the thought and replace that with something different and generate a new emotional reaction. And so, how we're able to do that is the fact that the brain and the mind are different. The brain is the 2 to 3 pound mass that we all have under our skull. And the mind is the spiritual side of being human. And I'm not talking about religion, right? Regardless of what your religious context is, a spirit is what makes a human different than a grasshopper, than a whale, than my beautiful Doberman Pinscher Rockney who's snuggled up beside me right now. That's, and so the mind is really what gets to take control of those thoughts and say, hey, is this helpful? If not, I'm going to release it and replace it with something different. And if so, then hold on to it.
Right. And I'm imagining as you're talking about this right now, as a coach or, just a leader that's working with youth, your thoughts affect how you treat the kids that you're working with or your athletes, your team. And so if you're not mindful and aware of that, you are going to either, kind of going back to what your definition you talked about earlier, you're either going to negatively impact or positively impact your team. So I'd love for you to share some stories about how, maybe some of the people that you have worked with have, kind of be like, and I kind of remember a few little blips from your book being like, Dr. Stoking, I'm more aware now. And I can't remember, you have better words than me. So I'd love for you to share some stories.
Oh, I think the story you're thinking about is, one of our college football players, he came up to me at practice and he put his arm around me and looked down because these guys are way bigger than me. And, we're at practice in spring at Notre Dame and he comes up and he's like, Doc, I've never thought so much about what I've been thinking about, And so he just started being aware of all the thoughts and how, man, a large percentage of my thoughts in the day are not productive thinking. Right. And so he was able to really start to reshape how he thinks. But Justin, I love what you said about how our thoughts about others impact how we treat them, right? I mean, you've heard the studies, I'm sure, of teachers that were told that this class is an underperforming class. And then they did another class that said, like, these students are gifted. The reality of it is both of them had the same cognitive ability. And at the end of the year, the teacher who taught the lower performing class had lower performing grades. And the teacher that taught the gifted class had higher performing grades because of how they were taught, of how they were treated. And, my first summer, I worked at IMG for 2 summers as a mental conditioning coach. And I don't know if I didn't get the memo my first summer that this was like a kids summer camp, basically, where we had 8,000 kids throughout the course of a summer from 8 to 18. Cause I was just coming out of corporate America. Working with adults is easy. Working with kids is a whole other level. And I was just exhausted every day because I was like, oh my God, everybody sit down, shut up, stop moving. What is happening,
Right.
And it really impacted, like, I caught myself thinking about, like, I was annoyed with them, and I was like, listen, this stuff is important. How do you not care about this? And it was like, it was just very negative thinking towards these kids. And so I really took a step back and I was like, okay, why am I doing this? Why am I even in sports psychology? Why did I start here? And I went back to that conversation around identity, and I believe that sports psych is a bridge to helping us understand ourselves better, the man or woman under the jersey. And so then I started teaching, and while the kids would come in, I would just try to look at them and think like, ooh, I wonder who this little dude is going to be someday. Ooh, I wonder what this little girl is going to aspire to. Or, ooh, I wonder what the hardest things in these kids' lives are right now. And I just tried to reconnect with my purpose and see them for who they were and who they could become. And man, I'll tell you what, I mean, by the end of the summer, I was standing on tables, like doing the Notre Dame kickoff cheer with kids, getting them ready for mental performance session. And I had one class, everybody just made up nicknames and we just called each other by, I don't even know these kids' real names. I was like, let's all have code names for class today, and I had this 13-year-old boy who was too cool for school. But by the end of it, he was like Alpha Warhawk, and I think that you're so right, is how we think about people just changes how we bring ourselves to the moment. And it can totally transform your life and the individual's life that you get to serve as their coach, as their parent, as their leader.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm like totally agreeing with everything that you're saying, because I know that when I started working with kids 5 years ago, I was exactly what you're talking about at the beginning of this summer. Like, what in the world? These kids don't listen to anything I'm saying. Like, I'm just going to beat my head against the wall. Like, okay, you're my favorite. You actually listen to me. But a lot of the times, the kids that don't listen and that push back and the ones that are most challenging are the ones that need you the most. And totally. I think it does take a kind of a perspective shift of, okay, these kids are really smart but why are they pushing back? A lot of times for me that I've realized is trust issues. Okay. How can I build trust? Well, if I'm yelling at them every time, if that's my interaction with them every time, of course they're going to not trust me. Of course they're going to start pushing back. So, you have to start thinking in different ways and, interacting with them as their human, right? Because you talk about the man or the woman under the jersey.
It was, we had a group of like 150 tennis players, and they were all ages, like little kids to like 15-year-olds. Right. And the 15-year-old boys, of course, are like at that like way too cool for school stage, or silly stage. So they'd be in the back of the room, like being silly for the whole session and like very disruptive. And, but what do they want? They want to be a part of something. They want to have a job. And so, I took this group of boys, and when they first came in, I was like, listen, guys, these little kids, like they're all over the place. And so I need you guys to like help me manage this class. And like, I want you guys to sit like 2 rows behind the end, and you're going to be my sentinel wall. So nobody's allowed to sit behind you guys, but you're going to be like my back row, the dudes that need to be like locked in. And if people start going crazy, like if you could just help me, we're going to be respectful, but like everybody looks up to you, and I'm going to need your help. And you would have thought I asked them to like play on the national team, and they were just on it, and they helped the little kids, and they like, no, everybody needs to sit up front. And so it's like, man, I've just found like when you can give people a job and take their thing that they want to do for wrong, but figure out how to apply that energy towards good. And then when you name it something like a sentinel wall, now all of a sudden they were a part of something and they had a name for it. And I just think it's so fun to create that for kids. But kids are cool because like they actually get excited about stuff. Adults are a little lame because they're like, wah, wah, but they secretly inside, like also want that. So it's fun.
No, and I think you bring up a really good point about being specific too, because sometimes they're like, you need to be a role model for the younger kids. Honestly, sometimes they don't even know what that means, to be honest. But you were like, a sentinel wall, this is how you interact with the kids. And they're like, okay, yeah, we got it. We got you, coach. So that is kind of like leads me to the next thing that I'm talking about, what I want to talk about, which is about like motivation and just confidence, because that's a big thing in sports, right? Like, I mean, a lot of times, I mean, if you have 2 similar, right, skill levels, the person that is probably more confident in their abilities will win out.
Totally. And, in the book, we talk about the 5 keys to confidence and how, like, what actually goes into confidence. I think a lot of times people are like, I'm playing well, I'm confident. I'm not playing well, I'm not confident. I'm playing well, I'm confident. And it's just this emotional roller coaster. Or, some kids are just wired more confident or less confident based on how 100%. Sensitive they are, and not in a positive or negative connotation way, just some people are more sensitive, and so they process things differently. And so you can read that in the book, and we can build that in kids, which I think is helpful. But then as a coach, like once we teach people keys to confidence, then, we said our thoughts affect our emotions, which affect our body's response, which drive performance. I think as leaders and coaches, we need to understand that our kids often get their thoughts from us, right? And so in these moments, when kids are not feeling confident, instead of just saying like, come on, man, be confident, you can do this. Maybe asking questions like, well, why aren't you confident? And then when they say, well, because I'm smaller. Okay. But guess what? That is such a gift. Like I was a little soccer player, right? I was a center midfielder, and as 5'3", that's not big for a center midfielder. But what I figured out was, one, my center of gravity is a lot lower, and which means I have strong legs. And so when I can get low and get a good base, I can go up against somebody because they'll just go over my top and get a yellow card for jumping over top of me. Right. And so it's like, if you can hear what's actually going on in an athlete's mind and then give them different ways of thinking about that, often it can lead them to a greater sense of confidence and purpose and belief in, however their little bodies are created, and however, and I say little bodies, I mean, I deal with like 350-pound men every day that are like, I still say like my little guys, and they're really big boys. And so it's all of us. It's not just little kids. It's all athletes. It's all adults. And I think asking questions as a leader to really understand what's going on in your athlete or your employee's mind is a really helpful way to speak truth to them and help them, think better and therefore impact their confidence.
Yeah, I know that was a big shift for me, was asking questions. And this was, I made this realization when I was just working with young kids that weren't even in, sports, but talking about like behavior issues and, different things, like asking like, why did you do that? A lot of times instead of telling them, don't do that because of this, right? They have to like start to formulate their own answers. And I feel like if you start asking them questions, it guides their learning process. And like confidence comes from, and I believe it's in the book, comes from like improvement and getting better and seeing yourself get better and seeing yourself get those results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now performance is a helpful driver of confidence, right? When you learn you can do something and you can do it, that totally helps. But we need some other things as well. And so that's a really great point, Justin.
So with that, and we're kind of building confidence, and I'm kind of want to shift over, I guess it's a couple chapters later technically, but for me, like I'm thinking about when I was an athlete, and this has been probably one of the more tougher transitions for me from athlete to coaches. I was an emotional player. You talk about probably more sensitive people. I was more sensitive. Like I hated losing. I was a little bit probably of the pouty kid when he lost, and it kind of came true through like high school and getting like letting my anger get the best of me. And, a lot of people like are shocked when I tell them, because I like come off as like my normal, like casual, like non-athlete self is very like cool and easygoing, but I got quite a few technical fouls in my basketball career. And so that kind of translated over with refs in my early coaching career. I'm just curious, to learn a little bit more about emotional management. And of course, I still need to work on it myself, but like also being able to help athletes and younger people just manage their emotions.
Yeah. I mean, it all depends on the person, right? There's some people that really struggle with actual anger issues. And so working through some of that and pulling some of that out is good and important. And then the other side of it is we're also conditioned when we're little to make a big deal if something goes wrong, because what happens when a youth athlete makes a big deal, they miss a goal or they miss a shot and they're like, everybody's like, oh, it's okay, right? He gets attention. And a lot of times they say, oh, so-and-so really cares about their sport. They just care so much. That just means you care about it. So you learn when you're little, throwing a fit when things go wrong, that's a learned behavior. Okay. And the longer we go in our sport, the less helpful that is. Now all of a sudden the game moves too quickly. You need to reset and refocus and get ready for the next play, or else you're an inning behind and now you're really in a bad spot. I keep switching between sports of what we're talking about.
Perfect. I love it.
Baseball or softball. And, and so I think it's really important to understand that this behavior is no longer helpful for what I want to accomplish or what I'm trying to do right now. So that's one thing. And then with coaches, I always tell them like the number one way humans learn is through the modeling effect. And you are on them about not losing their head, but then all of a sudden the ref makes a bad call and you're running up and down the sideline screaming and yelling. So again, the number one way people learn is through the modeling effect. Monkey see, monkey do. And so if you want your athletes to be able to reset and refocus and be emotionally controlled and focus on what's important now and not get distracted by refs or the other team, then you need to model that behavior. And that's been one of the biggest things, just over the last 5 years with Coach Kelly and seeing his leadership style and how he's been an amazing role model to not only the players, but the coaching staff. Because the bigger your staff gets, the more they're looking to the head coach or to the coordinators on what is acceptable behavior and what is not. Like MFing a kid when they come out of the game, not acceptable, particularly if you say you want to win, right? Quarterback throws an interception or wide receiver drops a pass. And a lot of times you see that coaches on them. Well, again, thoughts, emotions, physiological response. So they spend time yelling at him and mother effing him. And then what happens? 2 plays later, all right, here you go. Little pat on the butt and send them back out there. Well, what have you just done to them mentally and emotionally and physiologically? You've totally disrupted their equilibrium so that they're not as focused, their bodies aren't as loose, and they have a higher probability of making a similar or same mistake twice. So really understanding how we model behavior and how we communicate on the sidelines and how that drives ultimate performance is critical.
Yeah. So my follow-up question with that would be like, I definitely understand, you don't want to berate someone, but I think something that I'm someone that's very good. Like my number one Gallup strength is I'm positive, and sometimes I miss on the like correction aspect of it. So what have you seen that like coaches have done or that you do that you're able to like correct a behavior or a skill or a performance without degrading the athlete or the person?
So I had the privilege of my grad degree is from the University of Missouri. My PhD is from the University of Missouri with Dr. Rick McGuire, and my GA position was with him in the Missouri Institute for Positive Coaching. And Dr. McGuire had a phrase, demanding, not demeaning. And being a positive coach does not mean that everything is good and that there aren't expectations and that there's no accountability. It means that we're demanding. We have very high standards, very clear expectations, but we never demean players in the process of that. And so, listen, I need you to get through your progression and execute. You are better than this, but you are not executing tactically. Where are you at mentally? Right? Or tell me what you saw in that progression. That is very direct and very clear and demanding. But one, it's not demeaning. And two, it's not all over the place. So I think also question asking is tell me what you saw out there or how'd you get through that progression? Because what that does for us is understanding what are they actually seeing and what are they not seeing? Like it literally might be he made a mistake. Like I know I was supposed to go here to here and I got stuck because of X. And it's like, okay, cool. Get it fixed. We need you on this next series. Got it, coach. Or he starts talking and you're like, oh God, he has no idea what he's doing out there. Right. And so now all of a sudden it's like, let's simplify the play calling. Let's go back to what we know he knows 100% and position him to be successful as the quarterback. So I think asking questions as a coach allows us to really know where our athletes are at and be able to coach more specifically,
Yeah, meeting, just like you said, meeting your athletes where you're at instead of. I had a great conversation with another podcast guest the other day. Was talking about like this fall will be my first time coaching competitively at high school level for basketball, and I don't want to plan my full like 6-month practice routine because I don't even know who's going to be on my team. I don't know what they need to work on. I need to ask them questions. I need to visualize and see. Right, we have to get to know them, and also like, can you talk a little bit more about how coaches need to learn about how each athlete needs to be motivated or learn, because we all learn differently or we're all motivated differently.
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, I just want to commend you for even having a practice plan. Like I know so many coaches that go into practice like without a plan. So that's awesome. I mean, and I think too, like what does that practice plan consist of? What's the plan for physical preparation, technical preparation, tactical preparation, and mental preparation? And are you incorporating all 4 of those domains in your practice prep? I think is a great way to think about it. And then, I would say that every athlete is different, but all athletes want clear expectations and to be held accountable to those. And so, we've got, I've had coaches that do a simple questionnaire, like come up with 3 to 5 questions that they ask their athletes to fill out to just get to know them better. Like, who are the most important people in your life? What's one of your goals athletically and academically? What do you like to do outside of school and your sport? And so, and then do a one-on-one, it could be a 15-minute meeting with each of your athletes just to sort of understand where they're coming from. What's one of the biggest challenges you faced in your life? And give them time to write their answers down and then do the one-on-one meeting. And then I think that really gives you an idea of what you're working with on a day-to-day basis. We also have, I also have a lot of our athletes do simple assessments, we use the 5 love languages, we use the Myers-Briggs, and 16personalities.com is like a variation of the Myers-Briggs that is really accessible for our student leaders, as well. I use the Enneagram with players to help them understand just how they're wired. And those are really powerful in helping understand how do you communicate and motivate and connect with different kids and different that are wired differently and in different seasons of life.
Right. And I also think it kind of goes back to helping them find their awareness because, right, you can't enhance without being aware. So it's giving them kind of the ownership and like understanding of, okay, so love languages, physical touch. So I'm gonna make sure I high five them, or maybe it's in the last. So maybe sometimes I just got to give him a look. I don't need to, high five him or anything else. He's not going to just give me the side eye or whatever it is, because I know him now. Right. Yep. So I think that's a good point with that too. So yeah, my next question would be about mental rehearsal. I kind of, you talk about it a little bit differently than visualization.
Yeah, we talk about mental rehearsal, again, different than visualization, because visualization, I think, implies only seeing things in your mind. And what we really challenge our athletes to do is to really bring that to life as almost like a dress rehearsal for a play, right? Making it as real as possible and really incorporating all five senses in that. And so that's really why we call it mental rehearsal, and really trying to activate different neural pathways in a much more powerful way than if we just see something, right? If we add taste and sound and smell into a moment, it brings that to life more. And what we know is that mental rehearsal actually helps build talent at the neurological level. And so as real as we can make those mental reps, it's almost like we're getting physical reps on the day. So if you take 100 free throws after practice and then you go home and do 100 more in your mind, well, you've got 200 reps on the day. And your opponent only has 100. And so, really adding that into is where you can start to see incremental gain, like small, getting that competitive edge and that mental edge.
Yeah. And I totally think that sometimes, like, as athletes, we feel like we have to overtrain, kind of the Mamba mentality. And like, sometimes some of our bodies just like kind of break down, and that's when injuries happen. And like, it's a way that you can get in, like, like you talk about, twice the amount of reps in half the physical amount of time, right? Obviously it still takes time to do the mental rehearsal. Can you like give a crystal clear example? So for a coach, like, how would a coach use a mental rehearsal for, let's say a great practice or a game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that have kids shoot free throws after practice and then have them lay down and lay on the court and focus on their breathing and relax their bodies and get in a positive mental state and imagine themselves in the gym against a rival school with the stands full and people screaming, and you're standing on the line and there's you're down by 1 point. If you make 2 of these, you win the game, and there's 3 seconds left on the clock. And put them in that moment, and then have them take a deep breath and go through their routine and take the shot and see it going in. So that's a way that you can weave that into like the end of a practice, and really create game-like scenarios to help them prepare in advance for being in high pressure moments.
Definitely. And so, but for coaches too, have you seen or other coaches use it like before a big game? Like they rehearse like, oh, this ref's going to make a terrible call. Like I need to imagine myself, or I need to feel myself controlling my emotions.
I guess I don't have a specific story. One of the coaches probably maybe heard that and did a rep for themselves. But I don't have a specific story to share on someone that might've applied it in that way, but I hope they have.
Okay. Yeah. I know I need to do that especially for games. Sometimes, you never know what the refs are going to call. And I think that's, I do just think that's also, it's part of sports though. And that's part of like the beautiful thing about sports is it applies to life. Like you don't know, like there's so many things that are out of our control. The refs are out of our control, but what do we control? How we respond to it, our thoughts to it, and how it affects the rest of our play.
Absolutely.
So you've had the opportunity to work with a lot of brilliant minds, probably in sports and not in sports. Who, you talked about John Maxwell at the beginning, but who are some of the most influential people to you and your work and your leadership, and why?
Oh man, so many people. I guess from an author standpoint, like John Maxwell, Erwin McManus is a phenomenal writer that is like one of my favorites. Joyce Meyer is another person I listen to from a podcast standpoint. Rick Warren, a lot of pastors, obviously, in that side that I listen to. And then, from like an actual mentor standpoint, Dr. Rick McGuire has been a huge influencer in my life. We talk probably once a week. He's been around forever. He's seen all different sports systems, and he's really helped mold me as a professional. And, my mom and my husband are two people that are critical to my development. And then, working and serving Coach Kelly the last 5 years has been an amazing journey. And then the leaders that I work with in the organization, our CEO, Jason Lippert, our, two of our presidents, Jamie Schnur and Ryan Smith, and then our chief sales officer, Andy Murray. I mean, those 4 guys are phenomenal leaders. And it's just been really fun to watch them grow, to watch their strength strengths be applied, and for them to sharpen me, and how I lead as well. So I think it's just been, all those people that whether I listen to or I read them, or that have been intimate mentors in my life and guides in my life, or colleagues, that I get to work with, or serve, have really shaped who I am and how I lead, and, how that translates to impact in the world.
Yeah, and they say that iron sharpens iron. So it's so amazing to be around so many great people. I know, like, at first, I think for me as a young leader, I kind of had a little bit of imposter syndrome, or like, there's sometimes the ego's like, oh, this person's great, they're getting attention. Like, why am I not getting attention? No, I'm a good coach too, right? But now that, I've had a few years to mature, and I still have a long way to go, but I think I'm really realizing that it is amazing to have great mentors and people on your team that like inspire you and push you to be a better, leader, coach, mentor, author, speaker, whatever it may be. So with that, I'm curious, for kind of our last segment, what is your obviously you've been on this, sports psychology journey, author journey, right? There's probably a lot of journeys we can talk about, but just for like young coaches and young leaders, like what's your number one advice for them? And like, what mistakes would you have corrected from when you were a younger leader?
I'm still young, Justin. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. I am young.
I mean, yeah.
No, I'm just teasing you. Way older than I want to be, but it's fun. I think I'm like mid-30s, and it's an awesome season of life.
Yeah.
I think one thing is just you got to trust the process, and trust the journey. One of my classmates from Notre Dame, he's working in pro baseball now, and just reached out. We've stayed connected loosely through social media, but now he's a leader in a pro sports organization, and reached out to just talk through how they want to position their leader of their mental performance department in their pro sport organization. And it's really struck me lately, like a lot of people that I went to school with or that I interned with are now like the leaders in organizations. And when I was young and in those spots with them as either students or interns, right, I either saw it as kind of like, this is my competition and I'm going to be better than you. Or I was like, I don't really care about you. I'm going to network with the people that are in the leadership roles at this time. And it never dawned on me once that at some point, these are going to be the leaders in the field someday. And so I think that, I think I built good relationships with those people, but it was because I like people, kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's not like I was intentional about, hey, right, we are going to be the leaders in sports someday. Like we should build relationships and really understand each other and stay connected. And so we do that naturally because I'm a connector, but like I was thinking, man, imagine how much more connections I could have with my peers at this point if I would have thought about that 15 years ago. So I would just encourage you, like as a young leader, as a young coach, look to your right and left and see, and you like, dude, that could be the head coach of Duke basketball someday, or that could be the president of the, Minnesota Vikings someday, so like you just never know, and build those relationships because life is a long journey and there's a lot of work to be done. And so build your network and be open with people and sharpen each other because we need a lot of great coaches and we need a lot of great leaders. There's never going to be not enough opportunity, if you're really good at what you do. And in fact, there'll be more opportunity if you build that network of, strong, close connections that you trust and that you've worked and bled alongside the journey with.
Yeah, connections really are everything. And I realized that shortly after I got out of school, and I like started telling all my college buddies, I'm like, it's everything, like, talk to your professors and all these people. And it's just like, at the end of the day, like, it's not to, like you were talking about, it's not to like be like, oh, we're all going to be leaders one day, but like at the same time, just being a people person and collaborating and getting to know people, professionally and personally too. It's just, it's kind of fun, and it makes the journey more fun too. Honestly, I have a question because you've kind of gone down the academic side of like sports psychology in the sports world. And I'm just curious, like, What about sports psychology stood out to you versus like, just going down like the coaching rabbit hole or whatnot? I'm just curious about that.
Well, if when I was like in sixth grade, I thought to myself, like, my ideal life one day would be an author and a speaker. And like, I had no idea what that meant. I just thought that that's what I wanted to do someday, like when I was 50 and retired. And then I led Notre Dame Christian Athletes. And then I worked in corporate America and realized like, wow, there's a very similar dynamic in sport as there is in business. Like we've all seen athletes that are like so gifted, but like they don't work hard. And so, I was like the opposite, right? I was like, not so gifted enough, but not gifted.
Yeah.
But I worked my tail off, And so like, I always sort of outkicked my coverage. And I just used to think, oh my God, if I had half of your talent, I could be really, really good. And then, I saw the same thing in business, really smart people that just, man, they didn't think right. They didn't lead themselves well. And so their careers never grew. And then people that maybe weren't as gifted, but they became the leaders in the organization because they knew how to just win. And I wanted to know, what is that? And that's when I found sports psych and I realized like, holy cow, there's like a whole science behind this. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think when I would go hear people speak, I would always leave like, well, it was really motivational, but like, what did you even say? And like, what does that mean? And it would just seem very shallow to me. And so to me, the science is like the depth of this. And when people are like, oh, so you're like a motivational speaker, I'm like, no, stab me in the neck. Like I'm not a motivational speaker, but I do have a lot of energy. So it tends to be motivating. But I teach science, and I want to equip people to live the life that they were created and called to live. And so that's what really drew me to sports psychology. I wanted to know the science. I wanted to have a depth of insight that I could truly help people with, and that would be distinguishing, in the world of a lot of noise, I think, that's out there right now.
No, that's beautiful. And I honestly, I share similar, I wasn't in sixth grade. I think I was a junior in college when I realized that I kind of wanted to be an author and speaker. John Gordon, who's actually probably the first person. Yeah, he's the man. I still listen to him and I follow his stuff, but he's the person that kind of got me into this journey of wanting to podcast, create content. And I do want to be an author and speaker someday. So this is my last question for young authors and speakers, because I'm sure some of the coaches and leaders out there that want to do the same thing. What is your advice to them on that as well?
I mean, you're doing it, Justin. It's start, Our CEO found a quote that he sent around to everybody that was like, think big, start small, but most of all start. And I think that's where a lot of people fall down, is like they have these big dreams, but they're afraid to start, or they think, well, one day I'll do that, or, well, it's not quite good enough yet. Or they start and like nobody follows them, for the first 3 years. And like, that's just how it works, and then trust me, when you get to year 5 or year 10, you're going to look back and say, well, thank God nobody followed me for the first 3 years. Right. Cause it was rough. And so I think that like doing things hones your craft, and it gives you hours under your belt and helps you understand how things work, and moves that talent from a conscious process to a subconscious process that then frees up space to get better and better and better. And so if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a speaker, if you want to be a coach, like start and then let that entrust the process and let that grow over time. Excellence takes time, and it takes years, and a lot of those years are quiet years. And I mean, shoot, if you think of like one of the greatest influencers of all time, regardless of your religious affiliation, think of Jesus. Like, he didn't start his public ministry until he was 30. Like, wow. That's a lot of quiet years where he was just tucked away doing woodworking, or David and Goliath. Like, dude, David didn't walk out and like sling a stone and kill Goliath. Like, he was a shepherd out in a field by himself, like killing lions and bears, and challenging himself to see how many times he could hit the same. I could just like see this dude out there, just slinging stones at a tree and practicing and getting those reps in. And then all of a sudden, like, you get your moment. And if you haven't been slinging stones by yourself for a long time, like, you're not going to hit the giant and you're not going to make history and you're not going to go on to be the king. Like that, we all got to think like that and not think that those are wasted years. Those quiet years are important years.
Wow. No, that's fascinating. And that's, very motivating for me because I always make fun of myself because I'm getting better at podcasting, but I'm notorious for asking too many questions in one response. So that's something I'm still want to get better. But those quiet years, you mean I can't have like Instagram moments every day where I have like 1 million followers all the time, right? Yeah. I have to work quietly in silence. So yeah. A lot of that resonates and makes sense. And I appreciate your time so much today, Dr. Selking. Final things is like plug your book, plug your resources, and where can people find you and learn more about obviously your book, you, and what you do.
Yeah. So our website is www.selkingperformance.com. And we've got our podcast that you can find there. It's called Building Championship Mindsets. We've got free performance articles. And if you're interested in the book, you can purchase it through my website as well. You can also get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all those other places. The book is called Winning the Mental Game, the playbook for building championship mindsets. And then we're on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. But my handles are @Champ Mindsets. That's Mindsets with an S. And I'm on Team Follow Back. So look forward to seeing you on social and hearing what all of you think about this concept of thoughts and mindsets and winning the mental game.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Selking.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.